Hello and welcome to Mabinda TV. So for now, I'm looking at the prospect of Edwin Sifuna. He has jumped in popularity ratings up to 10%. So he is now the fourth candidate in line. Of course, you had a recent polling by TIFA had President William Ruto at 24%. You had then I was closely followed by Kalonzo Musyoka at 19%, then Matiang'i Fred at 14%, then Edwin Sifuna is fourth at 10%. And then Gachagua follows behind with 9%, and then other candidates are below 10%. So basically now is Edwin Sifuna the formidable presidential Is Edwin Sifuna the formidable presidential candidate for 2027? Is he going to be the kingmaker that is Edwin Sifuna? Of course, we see the DCP party also doing well in Mroa it poll at its candidate Rotich came second at about that is 10,000 votes behind, of course, the winner of that by-election, that is David Keter. So basically, I think now Edwin Sifuna is in prospect to be a very formidable presidential candidate. So do you think he should now go for the presidency? I think the Senate seat right now is beneath Edwin Sifuna. Frankly, I think the Senate seat is beneath Edwin Sifuna, and maybe he needs to think of how he can manage to be the candidate for the opposition. Of course, the opposition, if they unite, they will have 76% of the vote because the Ruto on its own has about 24%. Of course, alliances are going to form here and there, and then of course the united opposition will very much want to field its own candidate. So I think Edwin Sifuna and I think also another poll taken by who has more ground between Linda Mwananchi and Linda Ground. So Linda Mwananchi has 74% of the ODM members approve of Linda Mwananchi as opposed to 26% who approve of Linda Ground. So basically, I think that is a faction war within ODM, and I think Edwin Sifuna could just run with this party, and I think he will be home and dry. So what has made? I think Edwin Sifuna could be the leader of the Gen Zs. Basically, I think the Gen Zs were looking for a tribeless they were looking for a tribeless leader, and of course, even if Edwin Sifuna comes from the Western backyard, but you can never attach a tribal tag on him. He's very nationalistic on his sentiments, and I think that is what is going to differentiate Edwin Sifuna from the larger. That is what will differentiate Edwin Sifuna from the larger Western politics. Of course, in Western you have Mudavadi, of course, the Prime Cabinet Secretary, and you also have that is Wetangula, the speaker. Of course, they are not sitting pretty as they watch Edwin Sifuna hammer out their belts. They're not sitting pretty, so you can't be sure that the two, that is Musalia Mudavadi and Moses Wetangula, are plotting a comeback. But I will urge Edwin Sifuna to continue on that front. Look for more like-minded leaders. Of course, as there are talks between Rigathi Gachagua and Edwin Sifuna on fronting a united opposition candidates. Of course, we'll see how those talks, but we need more of these talks if the opposition is going to mount a single presidential candidate in 2027. And I think if the opposition mounts a single presidential candidate, then that is the way it will have a chance of taking over the presidency. And I think that's how then President Ruto could be Kenya's first one-term president. Of course, you have Ruto supporters saying that there has never been a one-term president, and President Ruto will not be the first. But this is not these dynamics are very different. Remember, Ruto has lost a sizable Mount Kenya voting bloc, and of course, Nyanza is a bit slippery because you can't be sure they will not be so enthusiastic about a Ruto candidacy. So basically, this just changes the dynamics of the 2027 election. So basically, I think we need just to determine whether President Ruto can gain sufficient support in order to return to power. Remember, he was backed by Central Kenya by nearly 90% of the vote, but that vote looks to have slipped him, that is President Ruto. Now you will have the opposition basically wanting to front a single leader. So basically, this is it. We are going to witness a new resurgence from the opposition. They are going to be united in all their entirety, and that is how then the united opposition can claim to win. So, how do you think Edwin Sifuna is going to be the united opposition candidate? Do you think Edwin Sifuna is going to be the united opposition candidate? What does he need to do? I think he just needs to continue expanding the coalition and hoping that they will go into a boardroom, hammer each other out, and then emerge with a single presidential candidate to take on President William Ruto. That is how then the opposition could win the presidency in 2027. Of course, that is something that, of course, everyone thinks the country is in the wrong direction. Basically, look at teething problems. Look at the other. Look at the other things that are not working, and this country needs a recalibration, and you can be sure that the opposition will want to have a say on how they will mount the 2027 election. So that's it for now. Till the next time. Bye for now.